what's been going on with the Texas Attorney General's office lately as it relates to schools and also religious freedom.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. So a lot of things going on recently, especially with regard to schools and how schools are allowed to open and close. So what we've been seeing recently, and you've probably heard us talk about this some in the past leading up to today and leading up to this time, but how local health authorities are coming in and putting in place quarantines and quarantining areas, saying that local schools can't come out and operate and return back to operation for the school year. And we've been talking about this and talking about how schools should be allowed to return to school in person. And what we've been seeing is the AG has come out and has progressively been providing guidance and clarification to mirror what a lot of us and what a lot of you probably are currently in discussions about, especially parents, talking about how are my kids going to get to go back to school? How are we going to do this if we aren't able to send our kids back to school in person? So what we saw that a couple of weeks ago, the local health authorities in certain counties like Dallas County, Harris County, Travis County tried to say that religious schools didn't have the ability to open back up. They tried to quarantine and say that religious schools could not open, and the Attorney General's office came out with clarification saying that the local health authorities are not allowed to regulate, not allowed to stop individual religious private schools from opening and from making those decisions on their own.
Yeah, well, and I'll stop you for a second too, because look, I mean, if you've been to Walmart lately, you know schools about around the corner are typically, this is, you know, kids start buying school supplies. I mean, it's probably 2 or 3 weeks ago they started pushing a lot of those things out. But those are reminders of what normally is our schedule, right? A lot of schools are typically scheduled to start meeting in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And, you know, look, it was a shock to a lot of people a couple of weeks ago when Travis County and Dallas County had the audacity to say that private religious schools could not open up because of their orders. The AG knocked that out. Then we saw Harris County, they had a different approach to this. They put an exception in place for religious schools, but that's not where it ended. We've seen more activity on this issue.
The saga has not ended on that issue as well. And so, like you said, Harris County put out guidance saying, okay, we're not going to include religious schools. We're just going to try to regulate those schools that are non-religious, that are public schools. And the AG's office came out with another clarification just a couple days ago saying that there's concern that they can't do that either. They don't have the ability, they don't have the authority in the health and safety code, in state law, to come in and say that individual schools have to close because the coronavirus might be either in other individual schools or in those in particular.
Well, and let me just offer a public service announcement, okay? If you're a local government health official, bureaucrat, whatever they call themselves, if you're a part of making decisions for a school, or you think you are for a local government, you might want to check with the AG's office first.
You might want to check with them first.
Because, I mean, the reality is that's where the buck stops. Yep. And the reality is if there's any question about it, you're going to want to make sure you're in line with what the state's top law enforcement official says. And it's not like they've ignored the issue. They've invited government officials for months to communicate with their office if there are questions. And a lot of those government officials are making decisions at their own peril, because these are serious decisions. And I love the way the Attorney General's office, for any law student or undergrad or any kids out there that want some interesting reading at a very really informative level, read this latest couple of letters from the Attorney General's office. They walk through some important constitutional cases. They walk through really talking about the reality of what authority local governments do and do not have, and really how that's put into place by what happened in this building. State law is what guides things, excuse me. And so, but it's been great that General Paxton's team has been working so hard.
Absolutely.
In the heat of summer. We know how hot it is out here, and I'm sure in their office as well, but it couldn't be more timely.
Couldn't be more timely. It's classic and really great reading, like you said, from a constitutional perspective as well, but just very solid legal analysis, and we encourage people to go and take a look at it.
Well, and Mary Elizabeth Castle, our policy advisor, is with us here too. You know, churches, I mean, many of them were open for a while, many of them starting to open a little bit more, really starting to have more than just church services, having some of their normal meetings and other things that they have at their facilities. And that, I think, has been a part why we're still getting a lot of emails, calls, and questions looking for analysis as some of these local orders have been extended. Is there really an exception in place for the churches, and what does that exactly mean? And so we've been right there, including you and all many members of our team, providing that analysis. It seems to be that's been a value too.
Yeah, that's true. If you remember from the very beginning, it's been very confusing about what churches can or cannot do, and that's why we're thankful for different authorities, including the AG's office, but a lot of work that we did to ensure that churches had the right to open and to meet. But there's still a lot of confusion that even though they're open for Sunday service, can they have Vacation Bible School? If they're connected to a religious school, can they have a religious school? Can they have, child care during the service? Are we required to wear masks while singing, which is something that's happening in another state?
Oh, we'll be talking about that.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of confusion, but we're here to answer your questions. If you have questions about what your church is doing, if they're required to do certain things. I know a lot of churches, my church has faced some confusion about worship and about different programs in the summer. Feel free to call us because there is an answer to that, and churches do have certain rights.
Well, and look, here's another, public service announcement, if you will. While we've got concerns about how local government's handling a lot of these issues, and we're not encouraging more executive orders, if they're going to be doing that, you'd think the smartest thing would be to follow the language from the Attorney General's office and from the state government, even though there are times we've got some concerns with those. But if that's a concern you have is, are you doing things the right way, you might want to consider tracking that. And that's been the concern, is not only do you have orders at the state level that people have to look at and see, where's the law, where are the lines drawn. Now you got local governments that are doing something similar, and sometimes the language isn't the same. And we've been asked to provide some of that analysis. I know we're going to have an update on that soon, but that's something that we're going to continue to do as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, some local level authorities are still trying to do things different than the state, even though that the governor has come out and said you can't differ from what he has said. And even though we know constitutionally a local authority cannot do something different than the state level as well, but it's very important to know what you can do under the state level. And there are no restrictions, for example, on how many people you can have in a church service. However, you still have local authorities, I think even in Ector County, where they're putting caps, and even outside of our state where they're putting caps on church services, but that's not allowed. That's already been established that you can't cap the number of people in a church service. So please pay attention and let us know if you have any questions about what a local authority says, because we can assure you that you have more freedom in your religious services than you actually think.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So, and some of these issues can be very fact specific. They can really mean us looking like today. What's the local order? Analyzing that, give you some feedback. There's an email you can send it to, info@txvalues.org. info@txvalues.org. You can call our office too, 512-478-2220. If you've got some of those specific questions, we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as we can. But speaking of other states, Mary Elizabeth, we know Nevada and also California have made things very difficult for churches. As a matter of fact, the Supreme Court had a decision that was out recently related to a case in Nevada, and what happened in Nevada was you got the casinos essentially being allowed to have more people attend and be in their premises than the churches. And there was a concern. That case went to court, went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did not rule on the case. They simply refused to review it, but effectively it kept that really bad order in place. California has also made it very difficult, to your point about being able to sing, very restrictive. And look, it's been going on for quite some time, and I think that concern is going to continue to be out there. Thankfully, those things aren't happening in Texas, but don't think that it couldn't happen. I mean, obviously, with our Attorney General's office, that seems very unlikely, but it doesn't mean that someone might not try. And to your point, Mary Elizabeth, someone may be confused and think that the local government could come after them, and whether or not the AG's office is going to be there to back them up in enough time before they end up in jail. I mean, who knows what could happen on some of these issues. But that's why this building behind us continues to be important. People have been calling for a special session. Whether it's that or not, we're not that far away from the legislative session starting in January. Bills can be filed in November. As a matter of fact, we got a great event still coming up in September. September 18th and 19th is the Faith, Family, and Freedom event, our public policy, our policy forum that we have annually. Still have tickets available, txvalues.org. It's in the Austin area, but we're going to have a live stream option. And we got a couple of great new speakers. State Senator Angela Paxton is now confirmed for the event. Texas State Representative Valerie Swanson, our good friend Heather Gardner from the Central Texas Coalition for Life, and also Connie Burton, who's been writing, and her team's been writing a lot with the Texan entity about a lot of these issues that have been navigating. So get your tickets today. Early bird pricing still exists. And one of the things that we're going to have at that event, I'm sure, is this great booklet, Biblical Principles for Political Engagement. This is about the rights of the churches, a lot of good information on how you navigate these issues. There's an important election coming up in November, and you want to know what your legal rights are, also the way biblically to handle these type of issues. And look, since we are up at the end of the month, I do have to remind you that we do have a budget we have to meet every month. We know you've been very faithful. So many people supported us. We know there are a lot of challenges financially too. So if you can make a donation to us at txvalues.org, be really helpful to continue to do the work that we do. You know, we're probably going to have to continue to keep our work at such a high level because of the demands, the questions. You know, and I enjoy that people are communicating with us more. They're emailing us more. But I will tell you, I've been doing this work for a while in the same building for quite some time, and if it's not at the highest level, it's at one of the highest level that we've seen. But I do think, Mr. Covey, that's a good indication that instead of churches and people just saying, you know what, I don't know what to do, at least they're reaching out. They're looking for answers, and a lot of times we're able to provide them.
Yeah, absolutely. We're still here, able to provide and wanting to provide help for churches and pastors who need guidance or need advice on legal issues, on different types of issues. So we're here. You can also go to txvalues.org and look at our posts and our blog posts. But yeah, we're absolutely here and ready to help.
Yeah. Well, Mary Elizabeth, sometimes too, I mean, people are not at our office like they used to. We used to do an open house monthly. We scaled back on that. And so for them to engage in us at any level, and what I'm excited about too is some of these questions are very new. They're not simply just basic. While we get some of those questions of can we open, some of them are very fact specific. And it tells me that a lot of churches are getting back to what they do best. They're trying to be active and serve people.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's very encouraging that a lot of churches are getting back. You know, that's signified in the calls we're getting. They're saying, is our church doing the right thing? So that means they're not afraid to meet. They're not afraid to hold their events. So it's very encouraging that, you know, people are not being afraid of these local orders or the confusion, that they're actually going forward and practicing their religious freedom.
Yeah, I think what you said too is very important, that you know, it's you have more religious freedom than you think you have. So
right.
You don't have to wait for permission to come
Yes.
in and do some of these things. Go ahead and do that, and then you know, and then we can clarify if that's an issue or not.
Yeah, well, look, and so if you want that information, go to send an email to info@txvalues.org. Info, INFO at txvalues.org, and our team will do our best to get back. And so look, I mean, news is breaking every day, if not every other day. A lot of things going on. So check out our social media channels on Twitter, also Instagram, and of course our Facebook updates. We haven't announced our weekly radio show guest, but last week we had the Attorney General. Am I right? I'm trying to remember where I was last Friday. Okay, we had Attorney General Ken Paxton. What a timely guest, okay? That team has been working hard, but we'll be announcing that soon, so you want to check out our weekly radio program. That's on 1120 a.m. in the Central Texas area, and 101.1, 100.1, 101.1 on FM.